What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review Zack Snyder's Justice League. This is going to be an interesting review because I've had about half-hour sleep in the last 24 hours. I tried sleeping a little bit before this movie made its debut at 3 a.m. So if at times throughout this review I appear bleary-eyed, or I stutter, or I slip, or whatever, I apologize, but I've got too much on my mind where I know sleeping would be an impossibility because my mind would be racing with all the things that I want to say. So let's just dive right in to Zack Snyder's Justice League. And if you're not interested in spoilers, then this is not the video for you. So let's get the obvious out of the way first. This is better than the 2017 theatrical cut. What Warner Brothers and Joss Whedon did to the movie amounts to a little more than a hatchet job, and they made this giant epic film feel much more slender. And I don't know what dumbass out there thought it was a good idea removing Darkseid from the original theatrical cut, because Steppenwolf is kind of a minor character. He doesn't even have any relevance to DC unless it's in the context of Darkseid and all of his various minions on Apocalypse. But what surprised me was how little of the final cut would contradict present-day continuity with all the various DC movies. I think Warner Brothers should just go ahead and say that this is officially canon, because nothing in the subsequent movies clashes with what this movie's established. The only thing that would potentially clash would be if Warner Brothers is scared to death of exploring the future and alternate timeline that is teased several times throughout this movie. But I'm going to be really curious to hear what the diehard Zack Snyder fans out there think of this movie, because sometimes getting what you want can be a double-edged sword. Like, take for example Alejandro Jodorowsky's Dune. Because of the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune, in our imaginations it will always be one of the craziest, most groundbreaking sci-fi films ever made. Even if the reality might have been quite different, we'll always just assume that it was going to be a masterpiece. And I think if Zack Snyder's Justice League, if the Snyder Cut had never been fully assembled, his diehard fans would have banged the drum until the end of time about how this was a completely eviscerated masterpiece. But having now seen his 4-hour cut, I will say that I'm ready to see more Zack Snyder movies set in the DC universe, even if they decide to make it some sort of little pocket corner of the DC universe with its own continuity, because I want to see more of Lex Luthor and Deathstroke and their possible Injustice Gang or Legion of Doom. But what I really want to see a lot more of is this alternate lineup of villains and heroes teaming up, with Batman and Mira and Deathstroke and Flash and Cyborg and Joker all teaming up and fighting Superman. That's a superhero movie that I really need to see. But if Zack Snyder were to decide that after making 3 movies for Warner Brothers that he's kind of done with Warner Brothers and DC, I would totally understand. But it would be a shame not to see more of his mythic, apocalyptic, the straight-up metal style of filmmaking, because the superhero genre needs distinctive original voices, because like any genre, the superhero genre is always at risk of becoming stale, and I feel like you need filmmakers with a really specific flavor like Zack Snyder to help keep this genre interesting, and his brand of superhero storytelling is totally unlike any other filmmaker alive. So for me, my favorite parts of this movie were these 3 massive scenes where we really get to see this signature style of Zack Snyder filmmaking on display. The flashback of the Age of Heroes battle versus Darkseid is 1,000 times better than the original movie, because you actually get to see Darkseid invading Earth, and just seeing Zeus hurling lightning bolts and Ares chopping at him with an axe, or Darkseid hacking off the hand of a Green Lantern. It all just seems so goddamn cool, and I feel like that's what Zack Snyder was put on this earth to do as a filmmaker, is give us those kinds of scenes. And then we get a briefer scene later on when they're about to bring Superman back from the dead, and Cyborg is basically getting a warning from the Kryptonian technology about what future might be coming. And then this vision, we see Darkseid on his throne, and we see Wonder Woman on a funeral pyre with little coins in her eyes as the ships of Apocalypse invade. And we see Darkseid laying waste to Atlanteans with his Omega beams as he impales Aquaman, and his eyes are just blazing, and it's one of the coolest shots of the movie. And then we get this really eerie, tender scene where Superman in his black suit is weeping over an incinerated body as Darkseid gently places his hand on his shoulder, almost like a father figure. And shortly thereafter, we see Superman completely destroying the Hall of Justice, and we see a Green Lantern is dead on the ground. As I was watching this, I was just thinking to myself, like, now we're talking. This is apocalyptic superhero storytelling, and I love it. And at the very end of the movie, Batman has another dream, where we get another one of these nightmare sequences where we see it's Batman, Cyborg, Mira, Deathstroke, Flash, who's wearing the elaborate armor that we saw in Batman v Superman. And it's not really an action scene, it's more of a dramatic scene between Batman and Joker as they plot and scheme about how to undo this future that's been created through the death of Lois. And I have to admit that Jared Leto, he knocked this scene out of the park. He's talking about how he and Batman have a truce as long as he's hanging onto this Joker card, but the moment it's over, just tear the card in half. And there's this beautiful moment where he teases Batman about having sent a boy wonder to do a man's job. Batman drops a straight up F-bomb and says, "Make no mistake, I will fucking kill you," which might not necessarily be consistent with Batman as I know and love him from the comics, but in the world of Zack Snyder, it totally fits. And the nightmare sequence draws to a close with Superman finding them. He's back in the blue and red suit, his eyes are glowing, whereupon Bruce wakes up. So honestly, for me, just for those 3 big sequences, this whole Snyder Cut experiment was 100% absolutely worth it. These are the kinds of scenes that I'll watch 15 or 20 times just to really soak in all the details, because we so rarely get that style of storytelling. But there are a bunch of other details in this new cut that I want to call attention to. First and foremost, it was awesome to see Wonder Woman in combat again with the sword and shield. I thought Wonder Woman 1984 was an absolute embarrassment. It was a complete train wreck of a movie, and it was great to see Diana back in full-blown warrior mode with sword and shield, taking on these alien godlike entities. When it comes to live-action Wonder Woman, that is the version that I want to see. Because Zack Snyder, he knows how to choreograph fantastic action. And nowhere is that better on display than in the brief moments where we get to see Superman back in action again versus Steppenwolf. And I love how Zack Snyder makes everything appear so kind of easy and graceful and fluid. For Superman, when he first arrives, he steps in the way of Steppenwolf's axe as it's coming down and about to skewer Cyborg. And he catches it on the shoulder and then just very gently blows his cold breath up along the axe. And it was just so smooth and so confident, and I started getting massive chills as Superman, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman just go to war with Steppenwolf. And I like how this version didn't have any of the stupid scenes with Superman and Flash racing to save the locals or anything like that. They stayed focused on the fight, with Superman holding Steppenwolf down and just pummeling him and frying him with heat vision. I was like, yes, thank you. That's what we're here for. But there are other great moments with Supes as well, like when we first see him walking out in the black suit and we're hearing the voices of Jor-El and Pa Kent, and they did a great job of recapturing the flavor of that brilliant first trailer from Man of Steel, one of the best trailers of the last 10 years. He flies up into the sky and we see him absorbing solar energy from the sun. It was just awesome. And as I was watching the movie, I just kept thinking to myself that so much about this is kind of the antithesis of the Marvel brand formula. Like, I love Marvel. I mean, I've been a diehard Marvel fanatic my entire life, but never in a Marvel movie you're going to see so much slow motion and hear so much sad music and have such a feeling of melancholy. Or if you do, it's going to be very rare. And I just feel like the superhero genre needed this shot in the arm. But getting back to the changes, one of the most obvious differences is the fact that Cyborg actually has an arc. We see him becoming a reluctant hero and then finally embracing his role, but we get so much more information about how he came to be, his relationship with his father, what the full extent of his abilities are. And I enjoyed seeing the additional abilities when he has extra arms coming out of his back. And he has a really interesting face-off with 3 of Darkseid's minions at the end of the movie. The whole climax just works better. And I guess I should just walk through it beat by beat. We get to see Aquaman skewer Steppenwolf with his trident. That was awesome. We get to see Wonder Woman chopping off his head as his body falls through a boom tube back onto Apocalypse. And for a brief shining moment, all 6 members of the Justice League are facing off against Darkseid and Darkseid and Granny Goodness and all of his various lieutenants. But there's this major explosion that would have straight up killed all of them if not for the fact that Flash finally taps into his ability to manipulate time. He winds the clock back, and as he does so, you can see Cyborg and Superman kind of being reassembled and pieced back together. So overall, that final battle scene was heads and shoulders above Joss Whedon's handling of a similar battle. And I'm starting to realize just how many great little details there were scattered throughout the movie. I love getting to see Commissioner Gordon and the Gotham City Police Department. There was a great beat with Mira's fighting Steppenwolf about halfway through the movie, where we see her pulling blood and water out of Steppenwolf's face. Only Zack Snyder cooks up that kind of stuff, but that was awesome. And then little details about the Atlantean and Amazonian history and how they eventually had a war. And Wonder Woman points out that the fact that she and Aquaman are getting along, this is the first time in thousands of years that Amazon and Atlantean have even spoken to each other. And this time around, Steppenwolf, he was just a much better villain. I love how his eyes were glowing blue at the end. I loved his armor and the way the spikes would come out. He just looked so much more badass. And I don't know how many of you out there are Scotch drinkers, but one moment I particularly loved, Alfred was pouring a glass of Talisker single malt as Steppenwolf begins the Unity. If any of you like Scotch out there, definitely try Talisker. It's fantastic. And the last little detail that I really enjoyed was seeing how the ruins of Wayne Manor was going to be the foundation for a new Hall of Justice for this new team that Batman has successfully assembled. Once again, that's not remotely consistent with the comics, but it's very consistent with this world that Zack Snyder's building, because this is Zack Snyder's Justice League, and love it or hate it, he has a very specific take or interpretation of how he wants to flesh out this universe. And before I get to my handful of criticisms, I have two quick notes that I think are kind of good and bad, or mediocre, however you want to describe it. Martian Manhunter. I love the fact that they included him in the movie. I like how he looked, even if it was a little digital looking. But in that he was one of the founding members of the Justice League in the comics, it was very appropriate to have him here in the movie. And I like how he came to see Bruce Wayne at the end of the movie to warn him that Darkseid is going to be using a very old school armada and bringing it across the galaxy in order to attack their world. But honestly, they should have found a way to give him at least one action beat. It just felt a little fan service-y. However, because I love the character so much, I was glad to see him there. And as long as we're talking about members of the Justice League, they teased the arrival of the Ryan Choi version of Adam, who I believe was the third person to wear the suit. I would have preferred they go with the original, Ray Palmer. But they need to go ahead and give that character some movies, because at this point, Ant-Man's about to get his third solo movie, and he appeared in Civil War, and he appeared in Endgame. So Marvel's got a very healthy lead over DC when it comes to stories featuring their most famous shrinking characters. But I'm starting to feel my eyes closing involuntarily, so I'm going to real quickly just go through some of my criticisms, and they're not that many. But first and foremost, the HBO Max streaming platform, it sucks. It crashed probably 11, 12, 13 times. And it didn't start crashing until about 7 o'clock or 7:15 as people started waking up and logging on and watching the movie. Because I started the movie around like 3:10, 3:15. I took a few breaks in order to make some food, but it was running just fine. But HBO Max has been planning the launch of this movie for a year at this point. They should have anticipated demand, and this movie should not be crashing on day one. Another gripe I have, I'm not the world's biggest fan of the 4:3 aspect ratio for new movies. Obviously, old movies back like in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, they were all in that aspect ratio. And while 4:3 works great for a big, giant IMAX screen, very few of us are going to see this in IMAX, probably a handful at most. Most of us are watching this movie at home on our widescreen TVs. Just give us a 16:9 aspect ratio. And there are little details scattered throughout that I found kind of annoying, like Amber Heard has this weird accent that's totally different from the one she used in Aquaman. And I imagine sometime between shooting Justice League and Aquaman, James Wan said, you know what, let's just lose the accent. However, her costume is way cooler in this, so I guess pick your poison. Do you want the lousy accent with the badass costume, or a normal accent with the green costume? And I would love to see Zack Snyder put her to use again, getting some revenge for the murder of Aquaman in the alternate future. Another little detail that I never really noticed until now, I didn't really notice it when I saw Justice League in the theater, but Ezra Miller needs to quit doing this weird thing with his fingers as he runs. Flash is fast, and admittedly his speed comes from power, not athleticism, but his form while running should be perfect. And I imagine anybody who runs track and field or whatever, when they watch him run, they're like, what are you doing with your fingers as you run? The form should follow its function, and moving in a weird way that's counterproductive to running quickly, it just irritates me. And my last criticism I want to phrase carefully, because on one hand, I think Zack Snyder has this incredible style and aesthetic and tone that only he knows how to do. But on the other hand, I've noticed at times he can be his own worst enemy when it comes to his choice in screenwriters. I feel like his screenwriters sometimes do him a disservice by kind of sloppy, decompressed, incoherent storytelling at times. I mean, first and foremost, obviously Warner Brothers was never going to release a 4-hour, grim, depressing, slow superhero movie, and a lot of that could have been addressed in the screenplay. But they're just these strange little contradictions that also pop up in his movies that always irritate me. Like, perfect example, early on we see Darkseid during the Age of Heroes battle slamming a hammer down on the ground and revealing this giant Omega symbol, which is the revelation that the anti-life equation is actually present on Earth. And yet later on in the movie, when Steppenwolf tells Darkseid that the anti-life equation is on Earth, Darkseid kind of acts surprised. And it's like, I know that battle was like 5,000 years ago, but you already revealed that once before. Also, why doesn't Darkseid just go ahead and travel to Earth right then and there? Why does he have to wait for these 3 mother boxes to be reassembled? Steppenwolf can keep working on that in the meantime, but Darkseid's number one goal has always been to find the anti-life equation, because with it, he can enslave the minds of every living being who's alive in the universe. And it just seems like sloppy writing that Darkseid wouldn't just step through a portal right then and there. And another thing that kind of annoyed me was how they didn't take advantage of the cool aspects of the black suit. Now, admittedly, the black suit looks fantastic. Henry Cavill looks so badass. But the whole point of the black suit in the comics was to help help Superman regenerate after coming back to life and get his powers back. But in this movie, he emerges at full strength. And I feel like that was just a missed opportunity where they could have found a way to make the black suit be incorporated into the story, where his powers start to kind of peak and crescendo and reach full strength again right before the Steppenwolf battle. And my last grievance is, how is Batman having these nightmare premonitions? Because when I first saw Batman v Superman, I remember I was kind of bewildered at the time. How is he having this vision? And whenever I would ask that question, people would give these elaborate explanations about what the future was going to be like. I was like, yeah, I get that. I have no problem understanding the future as it's being depicted. However, how is Batman, or just a normal human being, having these incredibly detailed, complex visions of the future? And maybe that's been revealed in some of Zack Snyder's plans, but I feel like after having seen Batman v Superman and now Justice League, where he has two major premonitions in each movie, they should have at least given us a tease as to how these visions are being communicated back to him. Because I love the nightmare sequences. I think they're insanely cool, but I just don't know how Batman's just plucking them out of thin air. But I think that's all I have for now. I honestly just really need to sleep, and I still have to edit this thing together, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So I'd say overall, I'm thrilled that I got to see this, and I'll be watching certain scenes again and again and again. And obviously, this is a dramatically superior version of this story over the original one. And honestly, if I had my choice over which direction Warner Brothers should go in the future with all their various DC properties, I would say set more of those movies in this fictional setting, this continuity, as opposed to going off in a different direction. But I would only feel that way if Zack Snyder were to stick around. But I'm sure there can be a wide range of reactions to this movie, both from the Zack Snyder diehards as well as from the casual fans. And I'm sure that the pros and cons of this cut are going to be fiercely debated for many weeks and months to come. But I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. So I hope you enjoyed this reaction and review. I apologize if my eyes can't focus and I can't look directly into the camera and I'm stuttering, but yeah, no sleep. It just shuts your mind down. But I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody thinks about the movie. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.